Hello, everybody. Gareth here with AutoCrit, and welcome. I'm today talking with Alex Boast at Undead Press. Alex and I connected during the AutoCrit Nightmare Fuel course, which we will chat about today. But really, Alex, today I'm going to ask you a few questions and just pick your brains about what authors can do or keep in mind, I suppose, to keep their editors happy.
Oh yeah, a rare opportunity for the editors to speak out, right?
Yes, indeed. But before we do dig into all that, tell us a little about yourself. What got you started on this sort of path into the publishing world? And while you are obviously an editor right now, are you also a writer?
Thanks so much, and it's great to talk again. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sort of more recently embracing the editor side of things after spending many moons as the writer. I've kind of left the corporate world as a copywriter, which is something I know you're familiar with, and ghostwriter, to really sort of embrace poverty and creativity simultaneously. So I have been working on a novel for donkey's years, much like I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. I remember at university 10 years ago, people were going, "Oh, you actually wrote it?" And I was like, "Yeah." They sort of thought it was a joke. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing short stories, some of which you can read, and the novel is now out, which is super exciting. But I kind of realized that, yeah, editing and getting involved in this kind of community of other writers and stuff helps you, and it teaches you. So I can help them, they help me. It's this nice kind of symbiosis. Whereas I've been a little satellite orbiting all these other writers in my past. Now I'm part of it, and it feels great. It feels really nice. I couldn't be happier, to be honest.
So with Undead Press itself, tell us about Undead Press. One of the things I know from talking to you behind the scenes here, that since you joined, there's been some major kind of revamping going on over there. So
Yeah,
fill us in. What does Undead do exactly? Where do you think it falls in the publishing sphere, and what are you all up to?
amazing. Yeah, so it originally was something called the Zombie Guide magazine many years ago, and I think that made quite a name for itself. But around about 4 or 5 months ago now, a really talented guy called Frank, who is kind of like an IT guy, really good with websites and stuff, just decided he wanted to create a platform for horror writers, which is amazing, right? Like he just
The
decided.
more the merrier.
Exactly. He just decided that was what he wanted to do. So he's turned it into Undead Press. And it's literally that. It's a platform for people with existing audiences, or to indeed build an audience, to come and publish some of their stuff. So there is a small staff. I am one of the newer additions to it. I've joined as an editor to kind of make sure that the quality of what we're publishing is consistent. And we're very lucky. We've had some quite serious, quite senior, experienced writers come through, which is a huge sort of boon for us. But at the same time, it's picked up mostly through Instagram and Twitter, this kind of really organic, really highly engaged audience. We're talking about 5,000 followers now, having only set up a few months ago. And what's really interesting as well is that communities sometimes are for writers almost exclusively, whereas we have a lot of readers. So the significant majority of our audience have not yet taken the plunge to actually sign up as a writer. We have hundreds of writers and thousands of followers. That's kind of how you look at it. But the growth's fantastic. We're having loads of fun, and we're actually in October, doing a magazine, which is super cool. So that would be like a thank you to subscribers and stuff of, kind of exclusiveness that you won't find on the site. So I'm chuffed. I'm chuffed to bits that they haven't kicked me out yet.
I was going to say that's excellent. So when you're building a platform, a lot of people are coming in specifically to read whatever's on
Yes.
there, and maybe, well, I guess find their own inspiration to write. But it's also ideal for you if you are dipping your toe into that water. There's people there who will read it.
Yeah. For me, it's important to make it accessible. Like, people think it's hard and scary and big, and they can be kind of shy, as I'm sure you know. So the encouragement that comes from the community is enormous. People are very kind to each other. They're posting lovely comments. We've put a blog up now with kind of useful stuff, like writing about writing as well. It's really designed to sort of help people with very little expectation of receiving anything back. Right, we're doing it from the heart, which feels really nice. Especially having worked as a writer where that's not always the case.
Oh yeah, of course. And of course, with Undead being focused on the horror genre, one thing that I did mention early at the beginning of the recording, but people may not know is, we did meet during when you were taking part in AutoCrit's Nightmare Fuel horror course, which
Yes.
I host with my co-host Beth, who we were talking about earlier. Uh, and then
Hello,
sort
Beth.
of after you'd been through the course, you got in touch and said, hey, guess what? I'm an editor at Undead Press now. And I thought that was just such a great outcome to hear from somebody who's sort of going through and then ending up in that position afterwards. I thought for the middle of this, could you tell us a bit about your experience with the course? How did you find it? What did you expect? How was the journey through it?
Yeah.
How do you think it helped you?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing absolutely worth mentioning is I'm in England. So for me, it meant some quite late nights, few gin and tonics, and some quite serious but not too serious word counts. Right? I think people get hung up on word counts. I prefer to look at you've done a thing or you haven't done a thing.
Yeah.
And what the course was really good at was nudging you into doing stuff. You had to do stuff. If you wanted to be part of it, you can't just show up, you had to participate. And I thought that was brilliant because you were making these writers accountable to themselves more than anything. And that was really powerful for me. And you could see people really trying, and I thought that was really nice. I interacted with a few writers, but I thought you and Beth particularly deserve some kudos. You guys did a fantastic job, and I remember in the kind of drop-in sessions towards the end, everyone turning their camera on and pitching in, and it was a real nice
Yeah.
feeling. So I'm sort of very lucky that I've managed to experience that again. It wasn't a one-off for me. I was able to go and join a different community of writers, so I'm chuffed with that. But AutoCrit is probably why I realized spending time doing this is so rewarding.
Yeah.
And why I'm happy to just jump on in, because you get out more than what you put in this case.
Excellent. And I think what you said there kind of leads into the next thing with that experience with AutoCrit. I guess the platform as well itself, when you see, that the sort of intricacies of editing and how much things can change when you're doing it. I want to speak to editorial work a little about what you're actually doing, because I think some people who watch this, who come across the YouTube channel, the AutoCrit YouTube channel, or even join AutoCrit, may be a little mystified still by exactly what an editor does. Once they get their hands on your work. So I thought today, while we have you, it's an ideal time to dispel some of that mystery. Give me, if you can, a bit of a rundown of your day today. What kind of things are you looking for when someone's work lands on your desk?
Yeah, so I mean, I am unfortunate in some regards, but also very lucky in others, in that I have a master's degree in creative writing from a uni in England, and that always makes me think of Ezra Pound to T.S. Eliot. So I'm like, hang on, you could put both hats on, couldn't you? There's a lot to learn from being an editor, and the biggest thing, I'm really very lucky. I've been hired to help with quite a serious novel that's coming out in November. So we're doing some big crunch on specifically line editing, but also bigger editing around story critiquing, feedback, and a more holistic view of the narrative. So you can sort of split it out into those two bits, right? There are line editors combing through it. I do that from background sort of anyway. And she has to tell me, no, we've got other people to do that. You're doing the big editing now. And I sort of remember I'm doing the big editing now. And I'm like, yay, but yeah, in terms of editing, what she said to me, and this is a paid engagement, she has sought me out from inbound interest, which I think is so important. Editors, people seek you out for help.
Yeah.
Sometimes as a writer, you have to go outbound and ask people to do stuff, right? But she was very interested in brevity, conciseness, and impact. She had a serious, we're talking a sci-fi novel word count in a romance book for young adults. And I
Ooh,
was
yeah.
going, whoa, okay. And thankfully, I've actually got a call with her later. We're towards the end now. It's going really, really well. She's super happy. But what it consists of ultimately is understanding that you can do a lot more with a lot less, right?
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
of the oldest writing things, you'll have all heard it a million times. You guys talk about it in the course, show, don't tell. But you have to really hammer people with that until they take it in, right? You need to keep repeating it until they've remembered. Show, do not tell. The difference between saying her nostrils flared in anger and her nostrils flaring is quite different. We know when your nostrils flare, you're probably a little pissed off, right?
Yeah.
Let the
Let
reader,
people interpret.
let the reader do some work, right? Because we're all patting ourselves on the back when we figured something out, going, "Oh, I'm so clever because I've figured the clues and stuff." Whereas I think a lot of writers, especially ones that come from a teaching background, spell it all out for you. You don't have to use much brain power. And that really, for me, damages the immersion. So it's about being immersed in the story. It's about getting into it. So the editing consists of currently, today it's 8 chapters, 8 quite long chapters. We go through line by line, but also holistically for the chapter and then holistically for the book. We do a bunch of feedback, we send it to each other, and then we hop on a call to go through it to get consensus, right? Because that's important.
Yeah.
You can't really have too much ego or opinion. Sometimes writing's just wrong. people get things wrong all the time. We all do. So having an editor will help you fill in your blind spots and identify those instances.
Yeah, 100%. I think as well, on the other side too, in editing, sometimes there's something you might want to change and you lose that argument.
Yes. Self-editing is a great skill to have, but it shouldn't be where you draw the line, right?
And I know exactly what you said there previously about when you're going through something with a developmental eye and finding yourself caught up in line edit mode on the way. You're like, oh,
Mhm.
that adverb needs to go, or this doesn't sound quite right, and
Yeah,
having to
yeah.
pull yourself back. It's like, no, we're looking at the bigger picture here in terms of the story. Taking
So
on those two hats.
I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying this, right? So I'll tell you something really interesting that happened because I think it's fascinating. She thought she knew the character so well, right? But the character had got away from her. A good example is, The Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood. Margaret Atwood tells us in her masterclass, I never named the character. Everyone else named her for me because she's not my character anymore. She got away into the world to do her own stuff. So the woman I'm working with was saying, this woman, my protagonist, is a classical introvert. I said, no, she's not. she's absolutely not. She is boisterous, stubborn. She get up in your face and tell you what's up. She recharges by pacing frenetically. She doesn't go and have those quiet, still moments that are typical of specifically that type of person that we're talking about. And that was kind of like the, mind blown moment where it's going, okay, yeah, we're not being consistent here. And consistency is super important. She'd had
Yes.
feedback from some readers that they had to stop because the character was annoying her. And what's important for an editor, I think personally, is you don't go, oh yeah, that's a huge, awful, terrible problem. I've got no idea how you're going to fix that. I was like, here's exactly how we fix that. Because we have the tools, we have the resources. We're kind of like coaches, we're like mentors. We're not going
Yeah.
to tell you exactly what to do. We're going to give you options to figure it out for yourself. So when I look now at, playing in the big leagues or bigger leagues, certainly actually making some rent and bills rather than just bills, right? You have to start thinking nothing is impossible. This is achievable. It's accessible. We can turn good books into great books and great books into excellent books. That's our blessing. Therefore, we should go and do it, right?
Yeah, and I think what you said there is something really important too. That came to my mind as you were speaking was the idea of the feedback that you're giving, again, not being 100% prescriptive. It's kind of it's almost coaching in a sense. It's
Mhm.
here's how it could be fixed in terms of a correct story structure or construction, but it's up to you as the creative to fill that in. I think that's why it's really, really important to get this editorial feedback from people who are experienced in giving critique in that manner. Otherwise, you get people
Yeah,
telling you how to write it. It's like, this is the way
that's
I would
right.
write that story, and that's not the kind of feedback you need.
But also, people get advice and feedback from their mates who love everything they do and aren't
True.
going to give them impartial advice, right? So you need a pro sometimes if you're serious about making it the absolute best it can be. For me, I've got a bunch of novels, and I think the first two are like my training and my. I do feel the third book is going to be the one, the big one. And I don't mind saying that because I'm not a perfectionist. I don't think anything I've ever done is perfect, but it's a solid foundation to build upon. But the good writers are the ones that invest in their craft, absolutely. Which is why
Yeah.
we go on the courses, we have the conversations. We don't just spend the time. Sometimes we spend money, energy, tears, sweat, and blood, all that stuff. You got to expend it.
And I think going back to one thing you said there as well about the annoying characters, people don't like this character, they find them annoying. Um, that's actually a really good point that you said about consistency. I often see a lot of the time when people say, this character annoys me or I didn't like this character, it's actually a byproduct of inconsistency. It's that
Hmm.
subconsciously, I couldn't get a handle on them. I couldn't figure out who they were because they were all over the place and I don't like them. There's a big difference between that and the really consistent character who is just hateful. Every time they're on screen, you're like, I hate that character so much, but they're actually a good character.
Well,
I hate them in
I
good
remember.
ways.
You remember those TV shows like Scrubs and How I Met Your Mother, and you've got this really annoying protagonist, and they're there to make all the other characters look better, right? In this instance, they hadn't tried to do that. They're doing it by accident. It's like we hate your protagonist and we love the world in which they operate and all the supporting characters. You're like, oh, this is a challenge. But interestingly, fixing it is normally quite small, right? It's little things that build that consistency over time that say actually she's behaving like an introvert now. She's consistent in her behavior. She's performing. If she's falling in love, she might behave differently. If she's afraid, she might behave differently. But behind closed doors, in private, this is who she is, and we feel like we know that and can relate to that. And if you don't have that, and that immersion breaks and pulls you out of the story, unfortunately, you're going to lose eyeballs, right? And I certainly, as a very small sort of indie writer of horror, would much rather have 10 people read it, love it, read a comment, enjoy it, tell their mates, than 100 or 1,000 people who just forget it straight away,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think I'd rather have 10, 5-star reviews than 100,000 1-star, quite frankly.
Oh, absolutely. Hmm.
Speaking of those kind of things and those sort of problems that can creep in, I'm going to hit you with a request for a little bit of a list from your editorial mind on the other side. What would you say? I think specifically, let's stay with horror because I know this one that you're talking about there is a romantic bent.
Yep.
Within the genre, what would you say would be the three biggest problems that you tend to see? And I'll reframe problem. If it's not a problem per se, just things that you most often tend to recommend be improved or beefed up, in terms of the story.
Yeah, right. Okay. So one would definitely be understand the difference between terror and horror, right? Because people never do that. Terror is your apprehension of something, the stress, the fear, horror being the reaction to something. One thing I think people do, this is the biggest absolute issue that the pros never do, and people even up to the middle grade level do, is the tenses. They mess the tenses so bad because they try to say, hey, let's do this in the third person past tense. And I'm going to be an omniscient narrator telling you everything. You know, you're not going to have to use brain at all. Do not engage brain here. Here's a list of everything that happened. No, we don't want a list, right? We want a story. So I write my stories in close first-person tense, but it's not omniscient, right? There is room for interpretation and ambiguity, and actually sometimes unreliable narrators. I think people. So that's one thing. The second thing would be people. They kind of not catastrophize. Catastrophize is not the right word, but they sort of build up and make big their paragraphs. And I think because they get scared of plot or exposition or being accused of rushing something, they just long it out. And you get in all these descriptions, and they try to do their best. Right, this is actually a fair point, really, but it's related to the second point. They put all their best writing where it doesn't matter, right? And then when they burn through the plot, it's sloppy. It's got mistakes because they're conscious of it. So there is definitely this kind of self-awareness that is quite damaging to the writer, because they're going, right, I've given myself an easy tense to use. I'm going to write a really nice description of a door creaking. But then when the guy dies, I'm going to rush it. It's going to be sloppy and messy. People are going to say they don't like it. I'm not going to understand why. I think they do understand why. I think people try to delay the important bits, and they stick with long descriptions or setting the scene, or even the research mode. So many people say to me, "Oh, I'm still doing the research. I haven't started writing yet." What? Jesus Christ, really? Do the writing, do the research, add the research as a new layer of detail to the writing. Then you've done it. What you're doing is you're keeping it over here. You're holding it away from you by making excuses, right? You're not doing the writing. You're doing anything but writing.
Yeah, procrastinate research.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad to see that you agree, because I haven't heard many people say that. I've heard a lot of people say research is so important. It's not. It's a layer of detail, right? If you don't know what currency was used in ancient Japan, just say coins, right? Just say the barter. It doesn't, unless you're going for historically accurate and that's your key selling point, people will forgive you, right? If they haven't got sliding doors, they haven't got sliding doors. It's okay.
Yeah. I think it's kind of your intent in the presentation there, because if you, I guess, well, things like if you're trying to be accurate to military action, for example, you're going to want to know tactics and what are actually employed in certain situations. And, for example, a SWAT team doesn't just kick the door down and run in, guns blazing.
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff is not research that's going to take you 7 months, of procrastination.
That's right. And actually, whilst I agree with that in some circumstances, two major things come to mind. I'm a huge Warhammer fan. It's futuristic sci-fi, right? And you get people commenting, this isn't very accurate. If you don't know Warhammer, Game of Thrones is the good example. They're like, this wasn't very relatable because it wasn't very realistic. It's like, you're in a world with dragons, man. It's not meant to be realistic to the point where it should have that level of sort of focus, right? Sometimes we suspend our disbelief.
It's like, it has space orcs. Come on.
You know what's interesting though? Some feedback I have had, because sometimes we writer types can be a little or I don't want to say defensive, but I do mean defensive. In fact, I will just say defensive. So, if you, as an editor, you're telling someone, hey, like, don't start, I say a lot, don't start a sentence with but, and, or so, right? English, we don't do that. It's rude. People, they'll immediately say, whoa, super famous writer, Stephen King does that. And it's like, he's allowed to, you forgive him his mistakes. You sort of need to be aware that you can do it a couple of times, right? Just not every time. If you're starting a sentence with so every time, it sounds conversational and informal. Like, so yeah, I shot the guy. Yeah. Whoa. It's damaging. It's damaging. So yeah, yes. Finding the right line between sheer puritanicalism and just having fun with it and enjoying it. That's another reason, if people don't find that line, they're going to put it off or they're going to do a bad job.
Yeah,
right?
quite true. It's like just dedicate to the practice. You have to do it. You have to be bad to begin with to get better, and accept that that takes work. Because I think you're
Absolutely.
exactly right. There is finding the right balance too. Uh, I'd say being 100% puritanical about, don't start sentences with conjunctions is nonsense. Anything going too puritanical is nonsense. But again, you don't
Mhm.
want to have and, but, so, and, but.
And people
Like,
do it,
no.
right? Or the dreaded Lee words. Clearly, I feel like this. Obviously, you feel like that. You don't need it. It lessens the impact, diminishes what you're saying. The worst part is when people say something's obvious and it's not. You're like, you're saying it's obvious because
Yeah,
in your mind
obviously,
it's obvious to you. It's not obvious to your readers, right? We're not
yes,
mind readers.
that's good for character dialogue if you want to paint somebody as being a very kind of self-absorbed, detached kind of person who obviously talks to everybody else, going, "Well,
Oh,
obviously, it's that this." What do you mean you
yeah.
don't know?
I'm gonna get. If my girlfriend watches this, I can almost hear her telling me off because I do this to people in real life when we're having conversations. They'll be like, "Yeah, so obviously my mum died," and I'm like, "What the hell? That is not obvious. Why would you say it like that?" Now I feel like a monster for not knowing. But how could I have known? Because you hadn't said. So yeah, it's one of those. But that's the thing. You gotta have fun with it, right? You've got to.
Indeed.
The process is different for everyone. So observe the processes you've been told about until they don't work for you anymore, and then change them. And that's what I do. But maybe I'm some sort of weird avant-garde sycophant, crazy guy. I don't know, but
Potentially, or obviously.
very good.
So I'll try to boil those down. I think restate the three. I think we probably got four though. Number one, choosing the correct. It's going to be point of view, isn't it?
Yes.
They're
Yeah.
picking who's the correct. Well, what's the correct way to promote to present this story in terms of point of view? You go in first person, dreaded second person,
I've
or
seen some great second person in horror.
okay, occasionally,
In fairness.
or third person. I think third person limited and first person tend to be the choices, really.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly
Correct.
nowadays. Number two, avoid descriptive overload, packing all of your great detail in places where it is not necessary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Leave it for the scenes. That's what I always say. It's, as well as finding that balance between showing and telling. It's like when it's a scene where it matters, where this is having impact, or in
Yeah,
horror, it could be the big scare scene or a death scene or things like that. Things that matter, you want to go full show. Get in there with the detail there. Otherwise,
that's
if you
right.
just need to get through and it's just transitory, dial it back and tell a little more. Number three, um, don't procrastinate. stop, stop procrastinating. I
Yeah,
think is
yeah,
well, stop procrastinating and practice. I think actually they could be combined into a
yeah,
really good piece of advice, which is if you're procrastinating because you're stuck on a certain idea that you're currently working on, just get practicing with something else.
yeah, yeah. Agree.
Speaking of those, I'm not sure if those might actually fold into my next question for you, but it was when it comes to actually working with an editor like yourself, what can authors do to keep you happy? To keep that
Oh,
working
that's a great
relationship good.
question. So, what the woman I've been working with most recently has done so nicely is apply and demonstrate the learning, right? She's not making the same mistakes over and over again. And what's so nice is she really cares. She's got skin in the game, and it's beyond having exchanged some money. This is real feeling. When this is going badly, it's deeply upsetting. When
Yeah,
it's going well, it feels amazing. So the highs are high and the lows are low, but they're shared, and that's an amazing experience. So I think a good word would be commitment. You have to fully commit to it. If you're sort of missing deadlines and you're missing appointments and you're going, well, it's okay because I've paid. Actually, it's not, right? That's not okay. That's never okay. If you've said you're going to do something, please do it,
yeah,
right? And that's a big hint to all the readers who say they're going to review. Make sure you review. Please do it. Otherwise, don't say you're going to do it, right? Don't trap yourself. But yeah, fully get skin in the game, you know.
yeah. I think that's actually an answer that I think so few editors give. When you ask a question like that, it's usually like be open to the feedback and don't but I think just that answer is like literally be a part of it.
Yeah.
Commit yourself to it.
Yeah.
You're quite right. I think some people would be like, oh, well, I can miss this or not do this because I'm paying for the service. It's like, no, get involved.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
on that side, getting involved, I want to bring this up last because we can see on the Undead Press website, you guys openly publish plenty of short stories and flash fiction
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
visitors. So I thought to close this out, it would be quite interesting to get your thoughts on the difference between writing novel-length stories and writing short stories. To sort of frame that for you in the beginning or set you up a platform, I think there's really two big differences to discuss there between the two. The first being the form, obviously, because
Yeah.
a novel is big and a short story is by name short. And the second one is also,
Yeah.
I guess, the skill set or the approach that you need to take to things like theme, plotting, character,
Yeah.
can vary hugely between novels and shorts. And I
Sure.
think many writers will thrive in one form but not really be able to grasp the other or never really feel like they're getting it. So what are your thoughts?
There's a definite fear. There's a blocking, powerful, overwhelming fear of the novel, isn't there? I certainly, when I was looking at upgrading from short stories, I tried to do it in the middle and be like, I'll do a novella, because I was keeping the novel over here. I mean, thank God I don't do that anymore. This is a novel now, you know. Uh, and I like it. It feels good because you can say I've done a novel. Shorts are where a lot of people start, and when you do an MA like I did, you get told people like F. Scott Fitzgerald are the greatest writer in the world, but their novels stink and their short stories were brilliant. You're like, that's really weird. And I remember saying to this lecturer, he was called James Miller. I believe he's still there at Kingston Uni, so shout out to him.
Shout out to James.
I said, this is really interesting because, there's been 50 or 60 of us listen to you tell us we'll never be the next big so-and-so, but then here's how to be the next big so-and-so. And I've noticed the irony of that. So what I'm meant to do is reject what you're saying, right? And he was like, yes, no one else has quite clocked that yet. You're meant to argue. You're meant to sort of say, hey, you don't have to compare me to anyone else. I wouldn't mind being Chuck Palahniuk, right? But I do like the idea of having my own voice and my own identity. Now, the thing about short stories is they're your training ground. They're where you find your narrative voice, because the feedback you'll get will probably be the same across short stories, even though they might be wildly different. They'll be saying, hey, I love the way you handle your characters, or you always do a great twist, right? And of course, you can take that over into novels, but the short is about understanding what your strengths are, right? Because you don't necessarily have time to eliminate or even identify weakness. It's about really honing your strengths. I do shorts anywhere from 1,000 to sort of 5,000 or 8,000 words, right? That's a big difference. Some people are loving this flash fiction. I love flash fiction, to be honest. Sort of back of a fag packet type. I'm drunk in an Uber writing a 50-word ghost story. There is actually a 50-word ghost story. I think it's great. But yeah, so the big difference is for a novel, people don't prepare themselves adequately. They just think of it as a short story, but longer, right? They don't do what you're talking about, which is really examine it. So I'm very lucky. I got to work on a film last summer, and I applied my novel writing to the script. And what I said was, we're going to create a sort of resource, a reference guide that we can go to when we get stuck. I called it the story Bible. We can go over to our story Bible. We can look at the characters. We can look at the themes. We can look at the different objects that present themselves in the story. We'll plot a timeline. We'll do a short synopsis. We'll do a long synopsis. This is going to be the gospel of this material, so that when we're stuck, this is where we go, right? Because you need that if you want to do in my opinion, a really good novel, that's the level of you need to know, right? You absolutely need to know. Anyone that says they don't and they're just winging it, I think you spent a lot of time thinking about it, right? With a short, you just need one big idea. But with a novel, even objects, and I talk about this and people look at me like I'm mental, but an object, for instance, the One Ring from Lord of the Rings, the ring has a story arc and almost like a character arc, the same way a character does. It reacts differently to Tom Bombadil and the Hobbits than it would to the Men of Gondor, right? It has characteristics. It has an arc, a traditional arc, even though it's an object. That's the level I think about with stories. So when I'm stuck, I consult my story Bible and it fixes my problems for me and I get writing again. With a short, we're a lot more forgiving. Just jump in, have a go. Plot, you need your opener, you need your conflicts and your resolution. That's it. Whereas you get all those secondary plot points in a novel that teach you about the characters and develop them. A great example, by the way, if you've Marvel fans, they're doing this what if episodes.
Oh yeah, it's on Disney Plus, isn't it?
They're about 30-40 minutes and they're a full story what if scenario of the Marvel world. It's a masterclass in storytelling. It's fantastic. So that's the example of, you can do it short, but then you go and watch a 3-hour film like Avengers, right? But there is some transferable stuff in there, but you don't get all that padding. The padding, if you're going to do it right. If you're going to do it right, you have to know what you're talking about. You can't be making it up. I have these two characters where their eyes change color because the son and the father are seeing their own eyes in the mirror. So if you haven't been paying attention, you think I don't know what the hell I'm talking about and I'm getting the character's eyes wrong. But it's actually a clue, right? Because one of the themes is like inheritance, but in this sense, a negative spiritual inheritance. You're taking on someone else's ghosts, right? So that is the level of detail I would expect. I don't want to hear, oh, I don't know, or, oh, I haven't thought about that. It doesn't impress me. I think do yourself the favor. Go and build your story Bible. If you need some help, get in touch to tell you all about it. But you've got to start there. Some people don't plan, that's fine, but you're always planning up here, whether you sort of admit it or not.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So you got to be honest, right? You got to be upfront about it. I don't have a great plan. I just got some stuff up here. Hey, that's a foundation we can work with. Write it down.
Yeah, excellent. That's great stuff. Build your story Bible. And of course, well, I was going to say, speak to Alex if you need some help with what exactly is entailed in one. But I was just going to close this out there and say thank you, Alex. But in that light, is there anything else you would like to share with the viewers to finish off?
I think the biggest problem people are having at the moment is not the writing, it's the starting to write. So the most important thing I would say is, I have a mate who's like me and you, Gareth, a sort of marketing communications copywriter guy. I sort of convinced him to have a go and he's loving it. His story got one of the most views on Undead Press really quickly. It was 2 or 3 minute read. People are commenting on it. He feels amazing. It was quite easy. We take a lot of pain out of the process by allowing you to submit. We edit, attach picture, categorize it, chuck it in. It's incredibly easy. You really don't have much of an excuse not to do it. So if you're one of these people saying, hey, I'm a writer, I'm going to write some stuff, remember that writers write. So please, not necessarily even with us. You could go and write something by hand on a piece of paper. But if you want, come check out Undead Press, sign up, write a story. I really encourage you to check it out as well. We can all be friends, right? We're not stealing each other's market share. We're bringing each other up for sure. So it's easy. It's accessible. It doesn't take very long. Go and have a go, right? That's my parting comment.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, Alex. We will sign off there. Thanks for watching. And go check out Undead Press. I don't know what side Alex is on here, but there we go.
Thanks so much, Gareth. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.